We are making teriyaki chicken meal prep. This is low in calories, high in protein, and absolutely delicious. For this recipe, you can use a whole range of different vegetables, use up some stuff you've got in the fridge if you wanted to, but for this one I'm going to be using one bunch of asparagus. I recommend removing the ends, they can be a little bit woody, and then I'm just going to slice these into about 2cm pieces. You don't want them too thin, but you don't want them too thick, that way they'll all cook at the same time. Next up, we got 2 medium to large size carrots. You don't have to peel these, but give them a good wash. Slice off the ends, slice them in half lengthways, and then on an angle, just slice them nice and thin, leaving us with little pieces like this, and if we cut them this size, they'll go perfectly with the asparagus. I'm using broccolini for this recipe. I recommend slicing off the ends, they can be a bit woody, and then just give this a rough chop. It's super easy to prepare rather than regular broccoli. We're then going to need 2 bell peppers or capsicums for my Australian and New Zealand friends. Any colour works, it's perfectly fine. Slice these in half and then pick out the core and the pith and bang them on the bench to remove any excess seeds. Slice these however you like, you can slice them in half to make them a bit easier to work with, but just make sure you get them nice and thin the whole way across, leaving us with little bits like this. As for the chicken, I'm using boneless and skinless chicken thigh. This is 1 kilo's worth and you can use breast if you want to. I'll leave details about that in the description. And depending on the size, you can slice these into quarters or slice them into thirds and then just slice it all in half. Just make sure they're all the same size. Add it to a bowl along with 14 grams of corn flour or starch and some white pepper to your liking. Obviously don't taste the chicken. Then just give this a good mix around with a spoon and this is going to help thicken our sauce as well as create a slight little crust on the chicken. I am cooking rice for this recipe. You can serve this with noodles or leave it out completely, but place 300 grams of washed jasmine rice into a saucepan along with 500 milliliters of cold water, a little pinch of salt to taste, and then just give this a mix around just to prevent any clumps from forming. Bring it to a boil, then we're going to reduce the heat to low, cover it, and just let it cook for 12 minutes undisturbed. I also recommend just moving it to a back burner. In the meantime, we'll make our teriyaki sauce. This is 60 milliliters of regular soy sauce and 40 milliliters of dark soy sauce. They're both interchangeable and give that nice umami depth. 70 milliliters of both mirin and cooking sake. Now these do contain alcohol. I'll leave details in the description about substitutes. And also 15 grams of sugar for sweetness, but if you don't want to add that, you don't have to. Put this over a high heat and just give it a stir, mainly concentrating on breaking up that sugar, allowing it to melt. And then once this comes to a boil, give it another stir, reduce the heat to low, and then just let this cook for 5 minutes to slightly reduce. This won't get thick, but it will melt that sugar and create a beautiful flavour. Now after the 12 minutes on the rice, we can remove it from the heat, but leave the lid on for a final 4 minutes, before then removing the lid, and then we can just fluff this up with a spatula or a fork, leaving us with these soft, beautiful, fluffy grains of rice. This right here is the macros for the rice alone, and the serving size is also on there too. To get the stir fry going, place a large pan or wok over a high heat, get this nice and smoking hot, then add in 1 tablespoon or 20 milliliters of peanut oil. Add in the chicken first, we're going to do this in batches if your pan's not big enough. Let this cook for about 3 minutes to form a crust, then we can keep this moving around regularly and just cook this for 6 minutes in total. We don't have to cook this all the way through right now because we will be cooking this later on. You can also season it up with a little bit more white pepper if you wanted to, and you'll notice I'm not adding salt just due to the sodium levels in the soy sauce. Once there is a good little sear on the chicken, this can then be removed from the pan, placing it into a bowl, and just make sure you scrape it all out of there because we don't want anything to burn on the bottom of the pan. I recommend adding in 1 tablespoon more of peanut oil, then we're going to add in all of that vegetables. Make sure the pan is nice and hot before you add them back in. Season it up with a little bit of pepper to taste, and then just mix this around. And now what we're going to do is stir fry this for about 6 to 7 minutes, just until they're soft but still have that beautiful bite on them. Also during this stage, the vegetables will pick up all of that chicken flavour, only increasing their flavour even more. Once that is achieved, we can then add the chicken back in along with any of those resting juices, and now we're going to pour in all of that teriyaki sauce that we made before. Like I said, this isn't a thick sauce right now, but once it hits the pan, the heat, the sugar, and obviously that corn flour that we added onto the chicken, this is going to thicken up really nicely and coat absolutely everything. All we have to do here is bring it to a boil and let it reduce for 4 minutes over that high heat before we can then remove it from the stovetop, and this right here is the teriyaki chicken stir fry macros and obviously the weights as well. Serving up is really easy. Divide everything by 5 or use the weights on those macro cards, and the container sizes I'm using right here are 1.3 liters. You can garnish this with some spring onion, which is optional, chili as well. But what we're left with is these beautiful teriyaki chicken stir fries, and this is the complete dish macros, including the complete serving size as well.
Now as for storing these, just let them cool down for about 20 minutes, put the lids on, put them in the fridge for up to 4 days and in the freezer for up to 4 months. Reheating super simple. If you have frozen them, just put them in the fridge overnight. Do it in the microwave or put it back in a pan, and then you can have it sort of like a fried rice style. It's actually really good. Also, if you've noticed that the portions look a little bit smaller recently, it's only due to the fact that I'm using bigger containers, because you guys bought so many of the other containers that they're sold out at the moment, and they'll be back in about 4 weeks from today's date. So just keep that in mind if you do want these containers, and I really do appreciate all the love and support. As always though, there's only one thing left to do, and that is, of course, we can then dig in. Whether you meal prep or not, please do make this recipe. The vegetables are really soft, but also have that slight little bite to them. The chicken's juicy, it's tender, and that sauce is absolutely amazing. Obviously, rice is rice. It's pretty bland on its own, but once you mix it through that sauce, it just comes together so well. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. It really does help me out, and consider subscribing, along with hitting that bell notification so you don't miss when I upload. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.